Good evening, and we're back with the new episode of the Progressive Update. We have with us a couple of distinguished guests. We are going to discuss the topic of Jimmy Dore's blurring of the white supremacy lines and what it is, why it is important, and what it is that how we should approach this whole thing. With me is Daryl Lamont Jenkins, who's a self-professed Antifa guy, long been researching extremists and extremist groups and exposing them, and also providing transition to some that wanted to leave the movement. And we have also Dr. Peter. How do you pronounce your name exactly?
Fritchie.
Fritchie. Okay. And let's just let me introduce the subject. First of all, how are you guys? How are you gentlemen doing this evening?
I'm well. I'm
well as well.
All right. So I wanted to get into it a little bit, and we have seen an interview a few days ago by Jimmy Dore, who is a comedian that turned out progressive. I don't think he needs introduction in this to this crowd, but he's shown this little clip, and let me run this.
So here's a guy. There's a guy who's a man who aligns with Boogaloo Boys. Who are the Boogaloo Boys? What is that? I don't even know what that is. Do you, Ron?
I don't
Is that
know.
like the Proud Boys?
I think so.
Boogaloo
I'll look
Boys.
at Boogaloo. My guess is they're Proud Boys who like to dance.
I think they're probably Proud Boys with rhythm. So this guy went to the state capitol in Michigan, and he gave this speech. Now, Ron, I want you to listen to this speech and tell me how much of this you agree with. Because we're told these people are maniacs.
Yes, they're loosely organized, far-right, anti-government, and extremist political movement in the United States, according to Wiki.
Okay. So here's what he says.
Antifa, Boogaloo, and right-wing militias, they are the antibodies, not the disease that is destroying our country.
He included Antifa in that.
Yeah, I think he said BLM, Antifa, and then he also said
Boogaloo,
and
yeah.
Proud Boys.
Yeah, so let me listen to it again.
BLM, Antifa, Boogaloo, and right-wing militias.
Yes, he says BLM, Antifa, Boogaloo, and right-wing militias are not the problem. That's what he's saying. Let's listen to it again.
BLM, Antifa, Boogaloo, and right-wing militias, they are the antibodies, not the disease that is destroying our country.
They are the antibodies, he says, not the disease destroying our country.
The disease is a country run by two corrupt political parties that do not care about you. So deeply incestuous with corporations that they are indistinguishable from each other. A government that spent 6 months debating whether to give their own people $600, but only 24 hours to unanimously agree to give billions of dollars to foreign tyrannical governments and corporations. A government that has bombed villages overseas my entire life for my supposed safety here. This is a call for unity. For all of American people that realize the true threat against us to come together. For every mother mourning her children that was killed by police. For every business crushed down by state lockdowns. For every broken soldier sent to fight wars that have no point. This is our last chance to avoid either a tyrannical government or a bloody and pointless civil war among American people who do not have that much against each other and have more in common than they realize. And a message to the government: we come in peace, we do not intend to commit violence, but I am pleading with you, with tears in my eyes and cracks in my voice. If you continue to oppress the American people, they will remain rational no longer. Thank you.
What do you mean by that?
So you saw this clip before we launch into what we know about the movement and so forth. What were your impressions on the subject matter on the clip?
Well, I think that when Jimmy Dore said he didn't know who the Boogaloo Boys were, he was right. He doesn't. And like you said, we'll get into that. But it's interesting because here's the thing. Basically, what Magnus, that's the Boogaloo Boy's name, um, basically he just pointed out he's talking about one problem that we have, a corrupt government, a corrupt political system. There are many problems that we have in this society and in this nation, and that is one of them. The other one is right-wing extremism, white supremacy, neo-fascism, and that's what the Boogaloo Boys represent. You can't always solve one problem with another. There is no room. I'm just going to say this flat out. There is no room for uniting with Boogaloo Boys, Proud Boys, right-wing militias, anything that is of a neo-fascist bent. You have to keep your distance from unless you're fighting them. Because when it's all over, you'll find yourself at the business end of their bayonets. So there is not going to be any unity with them whatsoever. And if people want to say that I am not being reasonable, or if I'm not, you're wrong. Number one, you want to say that I'm not opening myself up to any possibilities, you're right, because there will be no possibilities when it comes to that particular crowd. The only conversations that we should have with them is how they're going to get away from that crowd. If, in fact, as Magnus tries to suggest, they are good and decent people. You need to find another way, period.
Okay, well, we're going to delve more into this movement and so forth. But on the face of it, did either of you hear anything that stood out that seemed extreme or uncouth?
Well, what stood out was that this is not the rhetoric of the extreme or the insurgent right in the United States, which is not activated by the fact that Congress debated whether it's $600 or $2,000 in December for COVID relief. What they are debating is who is allowed to vote. And that is based on who is an American in their view. And they are not interested in counting the votes of people who are eligible to vote. They're not interested in counting the votes of citizens in the United States. They are interested in counting the votes of people who they think are Americans, real Americans, and who have an entitlement, not based on a majority, but an entitlement based on birth and ancestry and whatever cultural identifications they make, which are white, Christian, and with a certain moral code. And this particular speaker did not address that, but that's where they're coming from. That's why they are motivated. They're not motivated because of some technical issue of corruption. They're motivated because they have a vision of America that is not realized, but they believe it can be realized. And it's a vision of America that is based on certain cultural factors, beginning with whiteness, beginning with Christianity, that inevitably, and ethnic nationalism inevitably is authoritarian. And you do not work with those people.
Now, this guy, first of all, to Jimmy Dore's defense, he at some point said, "I don't know if this guy represents anything or who he represents, and I don't care." He said, "What he's saying is what I'm paying attention to." Basically, that's what he said.
But the guy is right when he says Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and Boogaloo or whatever is a symptom. Well, sure, and nobody it's easy to say, well, we have fascists, we have communists, we have conflict in the streets. Obviously, that's a symptom of something. Does that mean that now the incorporations of the symptoms are should or can or will come together? No, of course not.
Okay, and then he went on. He actually he was criticized for it, so he brought that fellow on his program to interview him, and let's take a little bit of a peek into that.
So here's a guy. There's a guy who's
Sorry, that's
a man who got in trouble for even playing your video on my. When I say in trouble, I mean the usual bad faith attackers came at me. The people who want to keep us divided, the people who take corporate money, that kind of stuff. Now tell me about the because since I played your video, other blue check reporter types have been sending me news articles about how the Boogaloo Boys are violent, racists, and terrorists, and they even killed a cop, and they got a couple of them got arrested on the way to a rally, a Black Lives Matter rally, and they had explosives. Now that's not made up, right? I saw it on 60 Minutes.
No, that's not made up, and obviously we're an entire national movement. Hundreds of thousands of people. You're gonna have idiots. You're gonna have accelerationists and extremists and people that do things that we don't want them to do. And it's become even harder now that we're banned off of all social media that we can't even keep track of the idiots in our movement and deal with them. So that's been fun.
Oh, so you're saying that by suppressing the speech of the most extreme members and the most violent members, it's now hard to tell who they are.
Yeah, and a lot of people on Twitter and everything will be like, oh, you guys might not be neo-Nazis, but there are neo-Nazi Boogaloo people, and I'm like, well, I don't know where they are. I can't find them or talk to them. They're on a million different websites, so I can't deal with them. We can't go out and purge these people from our movement because we've been blown all over the internet. When we were all on Facebook, we had this under control. We never had this problem. But once we got banned off of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I even got banned off of Google and PayPal.
Yeah, I know. I know. And so you're saying the censoring of people more extreme than you, and actually people who are violent, the censoring of their speech is now actually creating a bigger problem because it's harder to identify those people and weed them out.
Absolutely. Like when we were all on Facebook and we would be in group messenger and everything, and a guy was like, oh, I had a really bad day. I think I'm just going to, do something stupid. I'm going to fly off the handle. We can't wait any longer. We could all talk him down and be like, no, that's stupid. Don't go out and do that. That's not what we're about. And we could all work that out. Now that guy is on some parlor chat, buried deeply around a bunch of really iffy people egging him on, and there's no one there to tell him, hey, that's not what this movement's about. We're not here to just go out and shoot cops and commit terrorist attacks. It's never been what it's about.
So I've been told that the Boogaloo Boys want a racial civil war.
No, not at all. The whole calling it a Boogaloo, the whole meme behind it was just that it's a bad sequel to original because it came from the Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo movie, which was just a bad sequel to a bad movie. And in our context, it just means some form of civil conflict, whether that be a peaceful singing revolution, whether that be some awful government civil war, whether that be a second revolutionary civil war, or to the idiot neo-Nazi types, they would consider it a race war. And that's a meme that's been around forever. So when it comes to us, we are more of we view this as a upcoming, hopefully peaceful second American Revolution where all of these groups, like I talked about, come together, and we tell these giant corporations and these two political parties that we're done with them, we don't want them anymore, and it's time to go.
Yeah. So basically, I would like to address this thing because it sounds like, we're not really. There's no relationship between white supremacy or or extremism or far right extremism in our group. It's just a few bad apples, and they're like, we can't even find them. We can't even we can't look at them because we can't look for them because they're in individual little enclaves of the internet. The thing is that that kind of flies in the face of evidence. And if Jimmy Dore had done a little bit of research, he would have easily determined that that was not the case. Because the whole thing, like in 2016, there was a guy called Alexander Booth that was on Instagram. He used, I think his handle was Whiskey Warrior 556. And he used this whole plot that he's being attacked by the government. There were cars, police cars in front of his house, waiting for him, and they wanted to grab and nab him because he was considered against the government. And it turned out that in fact that wasn't the case. They were looking for him for stalking his ex-wife and showing up in her apartment with a knife. And but he managed to really rally around him a big group of Boogaloo Boys that paraded in front of the police in a menacing manner with guns and so forth. And eventually that didn't succeed. He eventually did give up. And a little bit later, there was this whole case of a guy called Duncan Lamp, which we'll discuss in after the next clip. Anything else either of you has to add about that?
Well, I definitely want to push back on that whole the number of Boogaloo Boys that Magnus had suggested, hundreds of thousands of people. I doubt that the Boogaloo Boys number in the hundreds of thousands. And the thing that I really didn't like was where Jimmy Dore was a little disingenuous when he said that suppressing free speech, suppressing their freedom of speech, makes it harder for people to keep tabs on them. What was actually happening was that they were coordinating, they were promoting, and they were organizing terrorist acts, for lack of a better term. They were basically trying to promote their activities, and they got shut down by the various platforms that they were on. That's not suppressing free speech. They like Magnus said, they just simply went over the parlor. When you're able to go from one platform to another, your free speech has not been violated. What they're trying to do is suppress the right for anyone to decide who they want to associate with. In all factuality,
you guys are focused. Amos, you're focusing on these individuals and their wives. Let's look at the rhetoric of what he said. He's a friendly. He's trying to be open and create coalitions. But what he's talking about is not dancing. He said a civil war. Now, a civil war is not between the 99% of Americans and the 1% of the corporations who are doing this and that.
Right.
A civil war is between people who are alike, except that they believe in very different things. And the only basis of a civil war is people who accept democracy, procedure, law and norms, and the citizens who are in the United States, and those who want to revise the view of who is an American and who is not, who is us and who is them, and essentialize America, therefore disregard popular votes of actual people voting, and recast this into terms of supposedly real Americans who are white and Christian. And that's the Civil War. So if you talk about a civil war, that's what you're talking about. And that's what this is what that guest talked about. In the end, that is their vision. I do not dispute the poignancy of individual stories of suffering in the United States. Obviously, people didn't vote in all sorts of ways because they were frivolous. They suffer, they have problems, they have resentments, and some of them are extremely justifiable. But if their view is now to create an us and them, based on white and non-white, privileged, culturally privileged and not culturally privileged. That's the only civil war they can be talking about, and that's what they're talking about, and I reject that. It's dangerous.
Well, this is important because I was just getting to I just want to make this point because I was just actually getting to that. A reference point for me here in New Jersey. He's no longer in New Jersey. He's actually in Florida now. His name is Paul Miller. I might have brought him up before. Paul Miller comes out of the Boogaloo movement. He got a little bit of notoriety because the Proud Boys had gotten into a fight in New York City back in November 2018, and he was a part of that fight on the Proud Boys side, even though he is not himself a Proud Boy. But he is a part of the Boogaloo movement, and what he said on Instagram before his video was deleted was that the Boogaloo movement is the second American Civil War that will happen, as far as he's concerned, as far as the Boogaloo movement is concerned, that will happen if the right does not feel it can no longer win national elections. And it will not feel that way. It will start feeling that they will not win as the demographics are shifting away from, I should say, traditional circles. That is what he said. And this guy is a full-on neo-Nazi. I mean, now.
Well, and Daryl, it's not just this person or that person.
Right.
That's the whole premise. What's been going on for the last 4 years? Voter suppression, steal the vote, insurrection, disregard for the fact that Clinton got 3 million more, Biden got 7 million more. By the way, the left in 2016, whatever left we're talking about, they did not come with these dramatics and antics. You know, the left accepted the Electoral College vote. It is the right, not only in America, but in Germany in the 1920s and 30s, that creates the real violence. Not that they have a monopoly on it, but they are the real instigators, always have been. And the fact they just can't understand that Georgia is not Georgia anymore. No. And 7 million Americans, way beyond. It's 48 to 52% Biden Trump. So therefore, they have to revise who's American. They have to not worry about quantity. They have to talk about quality.
Right.
And when you talk about quality, you're going to start talking about Aryans and non-Aryans.
Let me weigh in here just a little bit, because if you listen to the full interview and everything, this guy says he greatly dismisses that, and he rejects that characterization or the fact that he's has racist agendas, and I tend to believe him. Maybe he is.
Sure. Okay, so he is who he is. Fine, but that he's not representative.
Right, but
he's not what we saw on the 6th of January. He's not what we saw on the 21st of November in Washington.
And bear in mind, and people know this guy, he does support Kyle Rittenhouse, so he's being a little disingenuous himself.
I think
we cannot discount that.
Yeah, and I think that claiming not knowing who the extremists are within the movement is greatly doubtable, especially because these things were in the open on Instagram.
If you take Germany in 1932, there are plenty of people that you could identify who publish in newspapers and, you know, the social media equivalents of today, who seem to be conciliatory, who talk about that the communists also have a point of view, that the point is to move beyond the system that we have, and, you know, Nazis and other insurrectionists have a lot in common. Sure, you can find all those people, and maybe you'd even like to go have a beer with them. But they don't represent what's going on. They don't represent the power. They, you know, if you look at the brown shirts, uniform brown shirts in Germany, equivalent proportionally to the population, that's 2 million in Germany. If you put it in American terms today, 400,000 in Germany. Then, of course, you can find someone to have a beer with from the other side. Sure, They live in the same damn apartment building, the poor districts of Berlin. But in the end, there's a big difference, and they did not come together, and they did not coalesce, and one imprisoned the other.
Right. That's the point that we have to bear in mind. Incidentally, I should say this right quick. Jimmy Dore wanted me on his program after he got a lot of blowback from this interview with Magnus. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to participate because I had other obligations. So he had a friend of mine on his program, but he hasn't posted that video. He hasn't posted the exchange that he had with my friend. Instead, we see Daryl Davis in two.
But Daryl, wouldn't you agree that it's not about Magnus?
It isn't. No.
Let's have a beer with him. That's fine.
Well,
but there's something else. Way bigger.
The reason why we're even talking about Magnus because he was the one on that show. That's all. That's all. It's not about Magnus. It's bigger than Magnus. You're absolutely right. But the most important thing to remember when it is coming from Magnus is that he's not telling the truth about that larger movement.
Which is why he talks about civil war. Right. You're totally right.
And I think there's a kind of a expected a responsibility of somebody who's in the role of a journalist to do a little bit of a legwork and investigation, and in this case, Dore did not even know who these people are before he approached the subject. So it seems to me a little uncautious, and this is not something you need to dig deep into to find out. For example, I know there is this site called Left Coast Right Watch,
yes,
which is I suppose you know the guy who runs it, Daryl.
Yes, Abner Hagee. I hope I pronounced his name right because his last name right. But yeah, we talked yesterday, and the truth of the matter is he would never. He basically says if you are about let's say you are indeed on the left on some things, if you're pro BLM or pro Antifa, don't join the Boogaloo movement because they're not. You can join or form other groups.
Right.
There's no reason. It's not like the Boogaloo movement is so embedded in the mainstream of society or something that you cannot advance your goals without them. You have to advance your goals without them. I mean, you will never meet your goals if you have them around. I think Mr. Dore, it's not so much that he was being ignorant to the facts, and then he just simply didn't know. I come away with feeling he doesn't care, because like I said, he didn't publish my friend's video, the exchange that they had on his show. But he did bring on Daryl Davis. Now, Daryl Davis, for those who don't know, is a guy who is a black man who has worked to help rehabilitate Klansmen. And routinely, people on the right and people on the libertarian side go to him as some way to get a pass for all the things that they're doing. And that's what Jimmy Dore came across to me as trying to use Daryl Davis for. And my attitude is Daryl Davis does good work. I mean, he has to do what he has to do, but Daryl Davis cannot save you if you're trying to still be a Nazi and without any repercussions. People are still going to be critical, and justifiably so.
But Daryl, what I would say, I don't disagree with you at all. Mm-hmm. What I would say is that the clip with Magnus shows in a provisional, incomplete way the possibilities of how progressives in America who are not talking about a white America, but are talking about a just, economically just America, can possibly talk to other people whose parents and grandparents, after all, were FDR New Deal voters. Mm-hmm. It may not work because I think cultural and racial ideas are extremely strong. But that would be a bridge. That's fine, and that should be used. But in the end, this this idea that the Boogaloo Boys or the Proud Boys, you have this, there's this envy that they were so audacious. They got into the Capitol. They did all these things. My God. So of course there's kind of an envy. But the fact is it was Confederate flags. It was Christian nationalists. It was white supremacists. And they were out for blood. They had noose. They wanted to hang Pence, but what they wanted to hang him with is what they hung thousands and thousands of black people with after Reconstruction.
Yeah, truth be told, if you're going to reach out to the right and try to rehabilitate them, that's
no. You reach out to the constituency, not to the right.
Yeah. Okay.
Forget
Let's be real. Let's be real. This, in the end, it is about just reaching out to folks who want to do better. There is a difference between right and wrong, but but the thing is, it's one thing to reach out to constituents, to reach out to those who are trying to find a solution to that larger problem, and allowing folks to exploit those concerns to advance a worse
Americans in the majority have been messed over for 50 years. Their incomes have not changed. Household income is only bigger because the two parents work. Incomes have remained stagnant. Everyone says minimum wage, that's going to hurt the economy. The minimum wage has gone down. All you're doing is putting it a little bit back up. It's not even going to be where it was in 1973. The working class and the 50% lowest in America, they have lost. And all the tax cuts, Trump's and everybody else, of course people are angry. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. But that's black and white. That's Christian and non-Christian. That's homo-normative and non-homo-normative. I mean, come on, we all have the same lower paycheck. The minimum wage is the best way to look at it. $15, that's less than it was. Even inflation than it was in 1973.
Let me just get back to who these people are, because I started laying out the ground of what we do know about this movement, and it's hard to. I mean, I listened to this guy's interview, and I was like scratching my head as to, am I losing my mind or anything? But there are people who spend their lives researching and investigating things about this movement, and here's a clip from your friend here.
So here's the thing about the Boogaloo movement. They're a deliberate, coordinated effort that's kind of, think about them as like, instead of like the alt-right back in the day trying to like infiltrate the Republican Party, like this is kind of a libertarian, like insurgent accelerationist movement. It's like libertarian flavored. So like they'll kind of use this at, the Libertarian Party, like BS talking points of like, oh, well, we're not for we're not racist and we're just for access and liberty for everybody. But, like everything that they believe in, their entire approach to what freedom is and everything just comes out of settler colonialism. Like it's, I want to be free to have like all the guns I want and all of the land I want and be like the baron of my little fiefdom or whatever. It's basically a bunch of guys who just want to like carve up their own little territories and like be kings of their own little castles and stuff. But like these guys, like we back a few weeks after George Floyd was murdered, like we uncovered this we went into this Boogaloo movement Discord server that had 2,000 members called Citizens Liberty Organization, and they had like an entire channel devoted to public relations, and they had a public relations document, so we leaked it. And what did the public relations document say? Is it was coaching them on how to infiltrate and observe Black Lives Matter protests so that they could push things in a way where they could just start shooting at cops and start a mass, a chain of violent events that would let them like break the United States apart. It's accelerationism. It's just not the kind of accelerationism that Adam Waffen had a couple years ago, where it's like we're going to blow up infrastructure so that we can collapse the United States government and then carve little white ethno states on it. No, 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 no. It's these guys are way less coherent, and they're way more just about, I want to get to the collapse stage so that I can make a little like libertarian like anarcho capitalist, which isn't really anarchist at all. They always call themselves anarchists, but what they mean is they're ANCAPs, which means that they're like just hyper capitalist extremists who want to like carve out their own little fiefdoms for themselves.
Yeah, and this is kind of interesting. I looked into it a little bit more, and here's some something else that was talked about on the site, and that is that they intercepted what is it called, Discord a server called CLO, on which they were having open Boogaloo discussions, and some they were talking about Black Lives Matter protests and so forth, and they even mentioned there they were plotting all kinds of things on the site. One of them was they were saying they would protect the BLM, and they typed this: remember, they think this movement is about Black lives, because that was not what they were in there for. That was a pretext for being able to cause things to get out of bounds and to trigger a violent confrontation. Of course, if something like that happened, a lot of the protesters would be killed. But I don't know if that was a major concern to the people who interfered in these protests. This Magnus mentions that he did provide security for BLM, and that is the context of this. And the day after the day after this protest, one of the Boogaloo people that were posting on the site went and killed a policeman and injured another, and there wasn't even a pretext of protecting BLM people at that point.
I think that you're missing the picture. First of all, it's a false equivalency. Black Lives Matter is a movement based on protecting actual people in real neighborhoods who are endangered by the police whenever they drive a car or walk out of their neighborhoods. This is an actual, real movement. Number two, you have 2/3 of the Republican representatives voting to deny fact that Biden, whether you like him or not, won. You have huge demonstrations in Lansing, in Washington, in Portland, and elsewhere that are trying to overthrow democracy on the basis of an essential white Christian identity. It doesn't matter how these actual websites work. Is there a real connection between left and right that I can report to you from Germany in the 1920s and 30s? I cannot. There are individuals, but these are totally different constituents, totally different worldviews, totally different trajectories of the future, similar suffering, but very different consequences. And in the end, any idea that somebody provides security for BLM and therefore they're sort of like BLM, we're talking about a major movement that is protecting actual individuals in a racist society. and the Boogaloo Boys cannot be made equivalent to BLM. I'm sorry.
No.
And
And it should be pointed out that it's the very white Jimmy Dore that's trying to make that equivalence and trying
Oh
to
yeah,
give
and of
them
course
that
that's in
voice.
Portland too. All the violence was
Yeah.
white violence, Antifa white violence.
Well, I can't slam Antifa on that one because it's not because the bottom line is President. I don't even want to call him president, but Trump picked a fight there. And it should be noted that a lot of what was going on in Portland was in response to the fact that the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer, two groups that they also said we should be
And
uniting,
federal troops.
and federal troops were going there and basically attacking the town. What you see in Portland were folks actually trying to defend their home. There were folks there that weren't swinging. I mean, you could see
Right.
people there that was, I mean, those moms that were out there.
Right.
Yeah, so
But in the end, we're talking about neighborhoods. We're talking about people who, are you going to drive your car out of your neighborhood? Are you going to walk out of your neighborhood? How are you going to be seen? And you're not seen as a citizen. You're seen as black. That's the fact.
And what the Boogaloo movement saw, and what your more libertarian outlets see when they see that, is an opportunity to advance themselves. And we have to recognize that. We have to recognize that when they show up, that they might not be working in our best interest. I mean, that's one of the things. I was just talking with somebody.
They're not going to a funeral. Do they go to the funerals in
No, they don't
Minneapolis?
go to the funerals.
No, they don't.
No. And they're not, and they were gone. And remember, Occupy is a perfect example to this because they tried to exploit that. They tried to take it over. A lot of those people are the folks that we're dealing with in the street right now. A lot of those so-called alt-right folks that we are dealing with now come out of working with Occupy.
And you know why, Daryl? You know why they're interested in Black Lives Matter? Because the insurrectionist right always takes the playbook from the revolutionary left. Not that BLM is revolutionary. But the left is public. The left goes on the streets. The left says that we have, the left says that it has the workers, the masses, whether it's a majority or not, okay, whatever, but the people. And they're on the streets and they're in your face with the flags and they're loud. And it bothers a lot of people because they don't think that that's decorum. But and then the right uses this playbook. That's why they're interested in BLM.
Yeah, and that's something that we should be bear in mind in regards to as we go forward as a people too. We have a lot of strengths that we may not recognize within ourselves, but they most certainly do. And if they're coming to see us, if they're trying to come and exploit whatever it is we're doing, if they're trying to say that they want to unite with us, that means we're on to something. And we have to stay on that track, but recognize who they are first.
I want to track
as
back
well,
a
I
little
should
bit.
say.
I want to track back a little bit and go back to the historical perspective because Dr. Fritchie, you're specializing in the Nazi era and what brought to it, and you mentioned that there wasn't a cooperation between socialists and Nazis, but from what I understand, Hitler and the Nazi movement did appeal to the workers and to to rural folks because of the economic situation there. Is that not the case?
Of course, if you don't do that, you're not going to win an election. Workers represent about 50 to 55% of the population. Smallholders who are farmers, but particularly agricultural laborers, represent also a large population. So if you're going to think that your constituency is hotel owners and cafe owners and professors and businessmen, you're not going to get very far. Moreover, that's not Germany. I mean, the Nazis, it's not opportunistic. The Nazis saw Germany as the real people are the farmers, are the students, are the workers. So of course they're going to go after them. And the problem with conservatives in Germany and why they didn't get many votes and why they have absolutely no authority in the 20th century politics is because they disdain those social classes. The socialists didn't, but neither did the Nazis. Of course they go after ordinary Germans. That's hardly a surprise. and many ordinary Germans. There's no reason to think why everybody is a default socialist. Many ordinary Germans were attracted to the Nazi message. And the Nazis would have never been popular if they hadn't had these populist, it's not a gesture, these populist inclinations. And that's, of course, that's democracy.
And I understand.
That's how the right's going to win. In a democracy, the right's not going to win because they own hotels.
Sir, before we came on the air live, I brought up the Strasser brothers. Could you, for myself personally, can you explain? Can you tell me where do you think they had fit in at this time? What would you say?
Well, the thing is Hitler is the big charismatic guy because he admits to treason. And he admits to trying to overthrow the government back in 1923. And so he becomes the superhero. But just below him, what is Nazism? You know, how middle class is it going to be? How maybe we do push a little bit of socialism in there. Maybe the capitalists aren't quite right. And these are the debates. And the Strassers, Gregor Strasser especially, is on the more left-hand side in that he's less respectful of established business. And he talks about bread and work. That's his famous speech in 1932. And so, yeah, he's a little bit he's more on that one side. But if he were to go solo, he wouldn't have a chance against Hitler. But certainly the National Socialists cannot be explained by saying that they're a conservative movement. And the National Socialists hated the fact that they were assigned the most right-wing position in the parliament. You know, the parliament fans out and the left is on one side, the right's on one side. And the Nazis were assigned to the far right, and they hated it because they didn't think of themselves as far right. They thought of sooner they would have thought of themselves as center, neither big business nor international labor. But actually they thought in terms of depth, surface. And they thought they were the real Germany, depth. So they have a completely different geographical conception of their political place. But had the Nazis not had people like Strasser, had the Nazis not had the word worker in their party name, had the Nazis not talked about collective responsibilities of the community, which is what they meant by socialism. They didn't mean the ownership of the means of production or the end of private property, but they meant social responsibility and social community. And the individual is nothing outside that racial community. Sure, that attracted people. Of course it did. The Nazis, by the way, never got over 40%, which is why they had to use violence in the end and get elites to leverage them in power. But in no election did the Nazis ever get a majority. 40%. This sounds familiar, right? 40%.
Yeah, like I said, those who forget history.
Somebody's approval rate.
It's a lot. 40% is a lot in a parliamentary system. They were the biggest party.
If I remember
and the socialists had been the biggest party since 1890. And then the Nazis took over in 32. But still, they never got a majority. And Hitler flipped out. He could not, he had 500,000 people in front of him. Day after day after day. And he didn't make it.
If history. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's very similar, Daryl. It's very similar.
And what angers me is that we know better. We knew better.
If I remember correctly from my school years, I remember that they were allowing, the Nazi Party even allowed Jews and socialists to be involved in some, like in the party, wasn't it?
Never.
Really?
No Marxist was allowed. Maybe an ex-Marxist, but you would have to you have to really explain yourself on that one. Of course, you could vote. No one knows who votes. But remember, no Jew. Oh my God, no. Now, in the end, the Nazis have to fight all their world wars and so on. So they constantly compromised. First, a Jew is anybody with one Jewish grandparent, then it's suddenly with three. Then they're sort of allowed in the army if they only have one. But then actually, when the going gets tough against Russia, they get rid of those too. So race always trumps practicality. And they never know whether they're dealing with Mendelian genetics. Of course, all this is nonsense. Or whether dealing with a wine stain on the white carpet. But intuitively, they think it's the wine stain on the white carpet. So any drop of blood, Jewish blood, taints the whole thing. And they want nothing to do with that, even if they lose people in the army. And this is exactly the history of the United States of America in the mid-19th century.
I want to address somebody's comments. CJ commented that this was one of thousands of Dore's programs, and that we're going after him for that. Well, personally, I don't want to go after Dore for anything. I just think that we're obviously all pretty concerned about the direction it's going in terms of legitimizing movements, because he mentioned in his speech in one of these evenings that he was talking that he thinks that our movements should talk to each other. I don't think our movements should talk to each other. I think that we should talk to the, like you said, the constituents, and talk to the people that are hurting, and bring them on board, but bring them on board to the progressive movement, not the other way around.
I'll tell you something, Amos. Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist chief and the Gauleiter of Berlin, and Walter Ulbricht, who became the president of East Germany, but he's, basically, you say, the communists, Ernst Thälmann, Ulbricht, whomever. They debated one another. They always debated one another in these beer halls in Germany in 1931. They did talk to each other all the time. They lived in the same buildings. And Dore, I don't know who he is. There's no reason not to say this guy, Magnus, has something to say about suffering. And why would the right have any purchase if people weren't angry for certain reasons, beyond even racism and hyper-Christianity and homonormativity? Of course, we have these economic problems. And of course, no one says not listen to people, why they do the things they do. In fact, you'll never understand them if you don't take them seriously. But if they are white supremacists, if they believe in an essential real America of their own imagination, if the Confederacy is some sort of model for them, then they're not talking about the people.
No, they're not. And the thing is that I think it should be pointed out that Dore is catching hell because the people see right through it. We're now coming on. It's been 3 weeks now since the insurrection at the Capitol, and people are scared now. And then along comes Dore trying to basically tell everybody, well, those guys are fine. That's basically what he did, and folks are rejecting that, and folks would reject that. I think it goes back to what I said earlier in the show, that we know what's going on. We have the potential to do what we need to do without that element. That element needs us more than we need them. That's what you were speaking about with regards to Germany.
Daryl, you are the more successful Dore, because if you move people from the right away from white supremacists, you're taking the individual and you're understanding the individual, and you're listening to the individual, and you're understanding where he's or she's coming from, why maybe they are where they are, and why maybe they can go someplace else.
Right.
You're creating bridges.
That's because I'm genuine. That's because I mean it. I don't know if I can say that about Dore.
Okay, I don't know. We don't know. But that's fine. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And if he's modeling on you unsuccessfully, then it's unsuccessful, but it's a compliment to you.
Thank you. And remember, there's a lot of people beyond me that have also done this, but they're doing it genuinely. They're not doing it. I mean, I would put Daryl Davis in that category to some extent. I mean, I don't know exactly how he works, but the truth of the matter is if you are looking at that individual as somebody who's trying to find solutions to the problem, and you pull them away from the things that are not, then yeah, you're doing a good deed for the day.
And as Black Lives Matter know very well, don't have violence envy.
Mm-hmm. No.
It's the police, who are on your neck.
Exactly.
Don't envy the right for their violence. Violence is bad, and violence proliferates, and it numbs, and then you justify it and justify it and justify it, and goes on and on and on. Instead, Black Lives Matter is talking about communities. It's talking about victims. It's talking about repairing. It's talking about making people safe, not just in their neighborhood, but in the town that they live in and the county that they live in.
Exactly.
And it's not been long. It's not been long when people could not move beyond their neighborhood in many parts of the United States.
Right. And not too far from, a matter of fact, even in the town that I'm in, where I'm sitting right now, I'm only a mile away from where there used to be a swimming pool that Black people could not swim in. And when we won that right to do so, they shut down the pool.
Are you in Cairo? Are you in Cairo, Illinois?
No, I'm in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Okay, so Cairo, Illinois, that they did the same thing.
Uh-huh.
They closed all the pools before they opened them.
Cairo or Cicero?
Oh, Cairo, the most southern town in Illinois.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, I mean...
Oh, Cicero is its own thing.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. Hey, I don't know Illinois towns all that well. That's why I had to make sure if...
Look, what's that called, Daryl? That thing by evening you have to leave.
Sundown towns.
You don't think that exists?
Oh, I know they existed. I think they probably still exist to some extent. Yes. Yeah.
No?
Oh, yeah.
You go to Southern Illinois.
I've been my first column was written about me getting zeroed in on. My first column 30 years ago. And I could tell you right now, there are towns that just do not expect you to be there at a certain day,
and therefore we're talking about people and shoes and streets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the American right is talking about people and shoes and streets.
They're not. What you had said about Black Lives Matter earlier, just a couple of minutes ago, speaks to what it is that's the genesis of all of this. Fact of the matter is, it comes from something real. It comes from real concerns and real people who want to see real solutions. Those interests are not going to be the same as what some right-wing accelerationist wants to do. And
there's no equivalency.
No.
You're this is a humane movement versus, I don't know what these guys want, but this is you're based on it's a huge million people movement based on real problems in real life.
In a way, I do understand what Jimmy Dore is trying to do in terms of like his perspective is, and he brought in Davis to that regard. He's saying work even with the Ku Klux Klan, and he gave an example of a situation where there was a group of activists, Black Panther activists that worked together with Ku Klux Klan guys to achieve a certain goal. And he said, as a result, a lot of people dropped their racism in time, and things changed for the better. So you engaged the group and get a positive response. I don't know if that is something that can be.
American history since the Black Panther movement in 1968, 69, and Fred Hampton's murder and so on, shows that a lot of whites have not actually come to view it that way.
Well,
anyways, the Black Panther movement is not Black Lives Matter. Black Panther movement is something very different, and Black Lives Matter is a community-based movement in order to get people from the community to be able to move around their town.
Right, but his point was that through the fact that they fought for a joint goal, that they actually improved the relationship between the people in these groups. So
no, not the people, the leaders. The leaders sort of understood each other a little bit better. Yeah, that.
I don't think Jimmy Dore was being honest about that. I questioned because he used Fred Hampton as an example. He's saying that Fred Hampton brought the left and the right together, and no, that didn't happen. Just like Professor said, it's like no, because
Daryl, I'm not the professor. I'm Peter.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir, and I call you sir. Sorry, Peter. Just trying to be respectful here, but the truth of the matter is, I don't think that Dora had his history straight, and that entire. I mean, I just keep going back to the fact that entire interview, I mean, this entire thing that he's been doing over the past week has been disingenuous as hell.
But you know, the tension in the end is that you have to draw boundaries and say, you know, this is bad. Yeah. And on the other hand, there's too many Americans that are caught up in this in one way or the other that you can't ignore them. No. Right? And that is that's the ultimate tension. Mm-hmm. And in the end, of course, I don't think you go to compromise principle. But if you listen to people and try to understand their situation and why they are where they are, that might help. But you can't go against people. You can't go with people who are against plurality and democracy. But we have to somehow. Too much of America is really off on the right wing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a comment here from Craig Pasta. Thanks for the donation. He says, but go vote for Biden. Raytheon kills more innocent people in one day than Boogaloo and Proud Boys will kill in lifetime. Know the real enemy.
The real enemy is the Proud Boys. And yeah, you can add Biden in that one too. Yeah. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it goes back to what I was saying. We are talking about, I mean, the first thing I said this show is that we are dealing with two problems. We are dealing with the problem of a corrupt political process, a corrupt government. We do have to deal with that. That does not mean we ignore the Proud Boys and the danger that they bring. You know, it does not mean that we ignore the Boogaloo movement. We don't ignore the Klan, whatever. They can also be a problem, just a different one. So yeah, we're going after both. And the truth of the matter is, we're going to go after both in different ways as well. We're not going to come at Joe Biden the way we're going to come at the Proud Boys. Sorry. So just because we don't go after Biden or the Proud Boys in the same exact way doesn't mean that one side gets a pass over the other. It just
that's a false equivalent. That's a false equivalency. And the Popular Front strategy in the 1930s, which was to bring communists, socialists, and all liberal elements together, was the winning strategy to fight fascism. Mm-hmm. And Biden is in the Popular Front. He's not the guy. He's maybe not where you want him in the Popular Front, but he's in the Popular Front. We can talk about the casualties. You know, there's not that many Germans that were killed in the street battles of the 1930s. Hundreds, maybe 1,000, 2,000. Then double or triple that number in the concentration camps the first year. But once the Nazis were in charge, they killed about 35 million people in Europe by starting World War II. So very quickly, these numbers change. And this is because the fascists came into power.
That's a good point.
Bear in mind, the Proud Boys like to promote Augusto Pinochet as a hero.
Oh yeah, well then you already know you don't have to talk to them.
Exactly.
Well, they're also exalting Rhodesia as a good example.
Well, I don't know. I don't think I recall. I mean, and just to be fair, they probably have, but I don't recall the Proud Boys per se.
No, not the Proud Boys.
I'm surprised they know about Rhodesia.
Oh no, they would know about Rhodesia if they but there might be individuals that do go in that direction, but I can't speak to any particular case.
Right, so they want their white sanctuaries. They want to make the United States Idaho.
Yeah. Or more to the point, they always talk about how they want their own. They want to divvy up the land. I think the indigenous people might want to talk to.
Yeah, I thought that already happened. They just came too late.
Yeah, I mean.
All right, gentlemen. I think we went a little bit over our time, but that was a really good discussion. I hope everybody watching got a lot from it. It was very interesting to me. And I hope you guys can join at the future times when we discuss similar topics.
Stay safe and love your neighbor.
Same.
Take
care, y'all. Thank you for having me again. We'll be back.
Thank you. Bye-bye.